Everybody's a little bit rusty today.
What's a cube?
All right, we are live. It is the third Wednesday of the month. That means it's time for Kubernetes office hours, your monthly live stream where we hop on YouTube. You ask questions in the office hours Slack, and then we do our best to try to answer as many of them as we can. Channel, we have the live chat over here on YouTube, so feel free to start typing in your questions. How's it sound so far? Let us know. How's the audio? How was your break? Everyone say hello, introduce yourselves. We like to see where you're from, all kinds of good stuff. Alex asked me if we're going to have shenanigans on the show. We'll probably have shenanigans. We did not have a December show due to holidays, and November was really close to KubeCon, so it feels like we have not been around in a while. It is good to see everyone. How's everyone's break? Audience, I'm interested in knowing if someone actually went back to work and something was broken on their Kubernetes cluster, but it was still working like in cruise control. I always wonder if that's like a thing over the holidays. So with that, let's do quick introductions. We'll go over the rules, and then we've got your questions queued up, and we will get started. We are going to go for about an hour, and at the very end, if we read your question live on the air, we will be giving you a Kubernetes t-shirt, which none of us seem to be wearing. That's a thing. But it's the one that has a Kubernetes logo. Wait, Bob's wearing one. You'll get one of these snazzy t-shirts. That one of the panelists is.
It's hoodie weather right now, so
it is definitely hoodie weather. Okay, let's do introductions. Let's go. Chris, Puya, Pav, Bob, and BB. You can go last.
All right, no pressure. Going first. All right, so my name's Chris. I work for the City of Ottawa as a senior developer in our Kubernetes DevOps team. So I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. My focus is more on administration and making sure things are up and running, training, that kind of stuff.
I was muted. Sorry. Hi, I'm Puya. I'm from Transform. I do product and developer relations, and I am really deep into anything extending Kubernetes these days, and open policy agent maybe even.
Hi, I'm Pavlos. I'm a software engineer, and I work a lot with Kubernetes, both as a user and as an administrator. Mostly work with observability and metrics, Kubernetes monitoring. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Bhargav. I'm an independent consultant on cloud. So work with Kubernetes, especially focusing on monitoring and networking. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob, Mr. Bobby Tables in Slack. I am a research cloud administrator for the University of Michigan, and sort of my specialty is on-prem stuff, multi-cluster, and research type workloads.
All right, and Mario will be joining us later in the show. Awesome, it's good to see everyone in chat. Looks like everybody's here. Let's get started with the rules. Here we go. Before we start, we got some ground rules. First of all, the Kubernetes code of conduct is in effect, so be excellent to each other. We never really had a problem with that here, so please keep that in mind. This is also a judgment-free zone. Everyone had to start from somewhere. The entire point of the show is for everyone to learn, no matter what your skill level is. So there are no dumb questions. Just ask your questions. You might as well just ask them. So we can get them, put them on the internet. So as people start to review the back catalog, they can share in the expertise. And while we'll do our best to answer your questions, we don't really have access to your cluster or to any of your infrastructure, and don't want it. So we won't be, helping you live debug your cluster or anything like that. But what we will do is try to tell you where to look to find your problems or where to get you to the next step is. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experiences and pro tips. Same for the chat. We have a lot of experienced people in the chat who are always sharing their expertise. I think every single show, someone pastes in a new tool that we've never heard of and things like that. And that, again, that's kind of why we have the show, so we can share our expertise. So audience, you can help by pasting in URLs to projects that are relevant to the question that we're talking about. Links to the official documentation is always appreciated. What I do is I grab all the URLs that we talk about in the show, and then I whack them and I put them in the forum thread so that they're tied together with the show. So even if you don't listen to the show, you can get a list of URLs that are pretty useful for the community, and that's really awesome. So any blog posts, random GitHub project. I love getting random GitHub project no one's ever heard of, and then we look at it in the show, and it's actually awesome. That's really great. Feel free to post your questions on Stack Overflow or discuss or in Slack, and then repeat them to us here. So usually what happens, sometimes you might have a question on Slack Overflow, it's not getting any attention. Bring it here. We'll be happy to take a look at it. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, paying it forward. If you can, we've not tried this before, but let's see if we can get a retweet going of my announcement of this show going live. Because that would be a lot of fun. So let me link that up and toss it here in chat. If I can get some retweets there to get the audience hopping, that would be a lot of fun. Okay, and with that, panel, you ready? How's everyone's holidays? Everyone ready? Anyone show up to work to something that was totally broken? I would love to hear that story in chat. All right. So moving on, before we start, we do have a follow-up from Brendan, who says, following up on the Helm issue I was having, thanks to the thoughts from iPedrazas, we started some experiments related to the pure size of our Helm deployment, in particular the values file, and we found that if we reduced it down from 65,000 down to 724 bytes, we didn't see any issues. Our final solution was to break out the creation of TLS secrets to occur as a separate pipeline, just directly using kube control. Thanks for all the help. That is awesome. We love it. If you're stuck and we can't help you, and then let us know how it works out, or we will try to get you more experts outside of the show to help give you a hand. If you ever find a solution, we always appreciate it when you share that with the community.
65K is also a massive file for just some templated YAML.
Yeah.
I think it's when you put all the certificates in for TLS, then you get like.
Yeah, I would love to know like when that value was changed, like what the change control process was when someone was like, "Well, I think I'll change this value." But so VPCS, first question of the day. VPCS, hey y'all, any idea if the Edureka course help begin with Kubernetes is worth signing up? So I'm going to generalize this a little bit. I think we do get a lot of questions on which courses are good and not. I can't really comment on them because I haven't taken anything from the audience here as far as courses that you've signed up. I know I've heard great ththings about obviously the CNCF CKA program, which Chris, you just passed. Chris, do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah. So in a year and a half ago, I got the CKA. So I'll post some course links, but for my studying, I found the just to get like a general understanding, the edX Intro to Kubernetes course was really good. So that's a precursor to the one that the Linux Foundation offers, which is the official training course for CKA. I also found going through the task list on kubernetes.io was super beneficial. And then kind of the go-to if you really want to get an understanding of all the little nitty bits. Kelsey Hightower's Kubernetes the Hard Way was also fantastic. It takes a bit of time to get through, but it is well worth it. So.
Any other comments? If you have an opinion on this in the chat, feel free to just type it in the Office Hours channel. We are streaming the channel along with our video. All right, so hopefully that will get you started and toss in some links. Good. The next question comes from Pampy, which has been here before. Welcome back. And they actually gave us a link from Stack Overflow for PHP-FPM Nginx on Kubernetes. Panel, I know you looked at this before and he got an answer. He's just looking for a second opinion. And something we were talking about before we actually went live here is, I think a lot of people think that because you're using Kubernetes, you have to rewrite the world into Go microservices. And when it really comes down to it, the rest of the internet is running on PHP and Java. So I'm happy to field those questions. So anyone have the TLDR on this one here? Because they do have an answer at a -2.
I'm just reading over the question and everything now.
Sure.
Yeah, same here. I think it was mainly about where to put the data if you're splitting up the PHP, FPM, and Nginx processes.
Yep.
And if I remember, it's usually you should put it in a volume. In Docker, that used to be a bit more complex as you have to manage that volume. I would say that in Kubernetes, you just creating a persistent volume should and then mounting it to a pod with 3 containers should be nicer than because you wouldn't be able to have it in 3 pods and share volumes between them.
Right. That kind of brings me to a question. Hopefully I can tease the answer. Something I've learned from Duffy is, when do you determine what to put in a container and when to group things into a pod?
And for me, it just really depends on how tightly coupled the application is.
Mm-hmm.
So something like this might be, more difficult, especially if they're, the standard like means of communication is communicating over like a socket file or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That to me definitely leans more towards, being a single container or in a single pod, because you can share one of those things to multiple containers within the pod.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to break those out into multiple pods is probably not worth the effort.
Yeah, and then Pampy says, with a persistent volume, I can't roll back to a previous code version though if I separate my code from pods. Hold on, lots of people typing here.
And one potential idea, if you do still want to use a persistent volume, would be to, like, there's the whole snapshot restore functionality that's in there. So it's like, as part of your upgrade process, you could snapshot the volume. Although that depends on your underlying storage support and all that. In this case, though, I would probably wind up baking everything together into a single container pod.
Okay. Any other opinions? Anybody from the audience have opinions? Rampal says, sorry, let's see what you're needing. Sanjeev says, separating code into pods lowers performance, increases latency. Keep that in mind to prevent over separation. Anyone have experienced that?
Shouldn't be needed there, I think.
Yeah.
But I haven't experienced a lot of latency there. I mean, yes, you might be calling between 2 hosts. That might happen, but it depends a lot on your use case. If you have co-location of pods, you can have affinity rules to get them to the same host. And as soon as you're on the same host, at least depending on your networking setup, you should be pretty well set up.
So one thing regarding that, if you have stuff that's hitting services, even if you're on the same host, you wouldn't necessarily hit a pod that is also running on the same host. However, there was in the 1.17 release, that was the enhancements lead. There was something, I think it graduated to beta, for topology-aware routing of services. So you can add, preferences. So if this pod exists on the same host, prefer to route to that. If not on the same host, some other scheduling keys like same rack or same, availability zone and things of that nature to help, minimize the latency issues.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next question. If you have a follow-up to that, Pampy, we'd be happy to address it. Marky in the chat dropped in a link of resources he created for Kubernetes learning resources. That is awesome. Thanks for that, Marky, and welcome to the show. Let's see. Keep asking your questions, and I will keep going in this document here. We have our little notes document with all your questions queued up. Ben Bartels asks, does anyone know how to turn off the kube aggregator? We've been required to supply the -- request header -client -ca file and -- request header allowed name flags for Kubernetes 1.17, but we don't use those features. Any ideas on this one?
I do not really remember if it's possible at all to have the aggregated API removed. Something that you could do is maybe not super beautiful, but you could just put in the same C8 as you have already with the API server. If you're not using it at all,
Yep.
you wouldn't be opening up any security risks.
Yeah.
Disclaimer applies. I'm not a security expert.
Yeah, so he did some follow up and added some stuff for the question. Let me link to that in the chat here. He replied to himself with more information here. So as per the documentation, it seems like it shouldn't turn on unless you have one of the proxy _ star or request header _ star variables passed to the API server, but we don't have either set. And we're seeing errors like this in our logs and a bunch of errors. Additionally, we tried setting.
Do they maybe have metric server running? Because metric server does run on aggregation APIs or aggregated APIs, what do you call them?
Okay.
And metric server is nowadays pretty much a standard component in most things because of horizontal pod autoscaling and other things. I would guess that's it, but
So it could not be Kube aggregator at all. That might be just a metric server.
The aggregator is what is needed for metric server to work. That's how the metric server exposes its API.
Okay. He says, I think we do have metric server running.
Yeah, then you definitely need to set this up because otherwise metric server is insecure.
Okay. All right, Ben, hopefully that'll get you started. I see you're typing. Hopefully that'll get you in the right direction and we'll get some follow-ups from you. Awesome. Thanks, Ben. All right, next question is from Matt. It says, is there a way to add a static pod IP from the kube _pod _ network to my deployment YAML so that when container restarts, it comes up with the same internal IP? Interesting.
Yeah, as far as I know, you cannot assign a static IP to a pod. To get around the problem, what I would do is to create a service and keep changing the pod. That way, the service IP remains more or less constant, and you can access the pod as it comes and goes. That would be a workaround I would do.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the use case really needs, like if they really need a direct pod IP there, because maybe they're using endpoints instead of services and they don't want to use services.
Yep, he says the service is for the external IP is what he said. Sorry, he's just typing in some follow-up questions there. Information. He says the service is for the external IP.
So I think in that case, you need to still create a service, but like using load balancer type, so that your service will actually get assigned a static external IP, and then basically, if you send a request to that IP, it will get routed to your deployment.
Yep, Matt says he's looking to maintain the internal IPs similar to like how DHCP does reserved IPs.
You're only gonna be able to do that with a service.
Yeah, that's exactly the abstraction layer that Kubernetes wants to provide, because your pod should be treated as ephemeral. Stateful sets kind of break that a little bit. Not sure, do stateful sets have reserved static IPs?
So it's not static IPs, but they will get a consistent network identity with DNS. So you'll have stateful set -0 -1. And that's all through the headless service.
Yeah, that might be a workaround that would help. Same IP. Question is, why would you really need that? And could you change your use case? Like, is it software that depends on actual IPs being there and you're hard coding them? Could you use, for example, the downwards API to inject an IP? Or the use case would be important to see if you really need this IP.
He is typing, so we'll give him a minute there. Sanji gives us a tip to reserve internal IP. Safer option is to use service IP although some CNIs may offer truly static IP allocation, but I'm not aware of which CNIs, if any, do that. The software itself does not recognize the container when it comes back up with a different internal IP.
That the software running inside the container? And do you have access to the code? Like, are you allowed to change it?
There is one of the link.
Very hard.
There is a link that is some telco, some network management. One of the link that is forwarded by Hazard says that some network CNI can do a static IP. A telco grade network management in Kubernetes cluster. I'm just copying the links here.
Yeah, he goes on to say, it works with external, but then I have to go through the network stack and I get less performance than if the containers talk on the pad networking internal.
If you're worried about performance and service internal IPs, okay, IP tables might give you a little bit of performance issues, but there is other CNIs that build services in, for example, BPF, and you get quite a high speed with that. Like, I would maybe look into Cilium, for example. Not sure who else does BPF. Calico is adding BPF support recently. Not sure if they do that.
Bob was waiting for that. We're gonna add a gong every time someone mentions Cilium. We're just gonna.
I can't help it.
They said BPF. Bob will start to send you some links there, Matt, in a way, and then as Sanjeev does point out, software's not container ready. You should not assume that the IP is fixed. I hear you, but sometimes we gotta put stuff in there that we don't want to. So Matt, hope that helps you out. That's a very interesting question, because I think when you sit in your first Kubernetes 101 session or whatever, the first thing they tell you is like everything's ephemeral, don't depend on IPs and all that stuff. But then we have software in the real world, right? So that is good to know. Sean Chitwood asks, welcome to the show. Hello, I'm trying to verify some behavior and hope you can help. We have pods that are deploying Helm charts. We rolled our own Helm operator before the operator SDK was stable, but we think the leader pods are getting deleted and scheduled on a different node. What events, etc., should we look for in Kubernetes? We're using AWS ASGs to add nodes, so I see triggered scaled up events, but I don't see any triggered scaled down events. Do those exist?
Start reading it.
This is the first time I've heard of the concept of a leader pod. Is that a thing?
I guess it depends on how you have your app set up. It would just be like
Yeah.
a master node relationship.
Might be something that the Helm operator does. I haven't looked into the which Helm operator is it? There is no official one as far as I know.
The one I use is the Weave Flux Helm operator.
Yeah, and they said they rolled their own.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We roll our own too.
Well, they said they did it before the operator SDK was stable. Yeah. So I get it.
Yeah.
Sean, are you on the line? Hopefully we can get some more information here. If not, we can come back to this one.
I want to say you might be able to use Falco to kind of monitor what's going on there, but I think I've just been watching a lot of Falco videos recently, so it's just been.
Yeah, and Marky is on the line if you have Falco questions. So.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if if you're looking for events from your operator, I'm not sure if your operator really is emitting events, because the triggered scale-up events of ASGs is not connected to the operator.
Interesting. So Sean, if you're on the line, type in chat, and then we'll come back for you. IG asks, I'm having too many errors at the workers, physical servers that say slub : unable to allocate memory on node -1 from describing the nodes with kubectl. I found that memory limits doesn't reach more than 32% on each server. Should I check anything else? All pods contain CPU and memory limits.
Is this a big Java application? Because if so, they don't adhere, unless you're running like Java 10+, they don't adhere to the C group limits on memory. and will cause all sorts of problems.
Mm-hmm. So that is an interesting one. Hopefully, IG, you're on. And this does come up off actually pretty often with the Java workloads.
Yeah. There's other
Yeah, I would
stuff that you
try
have to
to check.
go for it.
I would try to check actual usage on the server. I know HTOP or whatever you have as a monitoring tool to check is anything actually using more, and you will have most probably running some other things on the server that also take memory.
This slub message seems specific to the kernel. It's showing up from the kernel. So one of the blogs said it is perhaps related to a kernel issue or a bug in the kernel. So the user space clearly says that they have sufficient memory, 32%. It's probably something they have to fix it in the kernel or upgrade to a different version of Linux.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it would be interesting to know what distribution and kernel version they're on.
And if it is Java and its garbage collection is kind of weird because generally, like, if you allocate say 32 gigs to a Java application, you really need 64 gigs to be able to handle all that stuff right. There's other wonkiness.
Didn't we? So sorry, I'm just remembering. And didn't there usually when the Java thing is involved, isn't the usually the killer just when the killer just be randomly killing stuff? Isn't that what we usually see when it's Java?
It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question is, do you really see errors besides that slub message? Because the message might not be a real error, because I think slub is towards allocating pages. And is that actually impacting anything?
Yep. Yep. And just so we address Ben's, let's start getting a little bit specific. Because wait, Java workloads don't follow memory requirements at all. Let's be a little bit specific
Oh, yes.
what we mean about what we're talking about. What happens when the containers take too much memory? Do they get killed by Kubernetes, or are they just allowed to run? So let's explain this a little bit. We don't even know if that's this person's problem, but let's clear the road on what happens on what versions
for the out of memory killing, and this doesn't have to be Java, could be something else that is breaking out of the container or that is using much more than they should, is you need to be very diligent with your allocations. So you need to have best C group slices set up for your kubelets and Docker, for example. So otherwise, basically your Kubernetes user space containers will take up the memory even from the kubelet, and nothing will be able to actually help you recover that node. So we had lots of issues just that could only be solved just by having like lots of buffers and lots of C group slices set up for the system, for the kubelet, and then for containers, and only giving the one for containers to containers. But then still, if you have something that doesn't adhere to your container limits or to the C group limits, like I think versions of Java before 10 do not, but there's
flags for Java 9.
Yeah,
exactly, for 9, and not sure if for 8 there is something, but at least for 9 there is.
So Marky's given us some tips there, and everyone just started spamming a bunch of articles on Java memory management that should catch you up.
It's a common problem.
Yeah. All right. To catch everybody up, it looks like some CNIs do offer static IPs, and up that Calico does, arguably the most common CNI, does support static IP per pod, and Sanjeev has given a link there. Sanjeev, you're really useful today. I'm going to give you a Kubernetes t-shirt, so stick around after the show. People who help, I give out t-shirts. I'm going to burn through my t-shirt budget, and the CNCF is going to be burning through our t-shirt budget. So stick around until after the show. I'll definitely give you a t-shirt. And those of you asking questions, we will raffle off 2 t-shirts at the end of the show. All right, let's keep on going. Okay. Srempal asks, oh, hey, Sanjeev, also asking a question. Awesome. So their question is, good morning. I would like to get some information on everyone's experiences with various single sign-on OIDC providers, options for authenticating Kubernetes API, as well as other apps like Grafana. In particular, your experiences with Keycloak, Dex, Open Unison, and OAuth 2 Proxy. We have not mentioned Dex in a long time. Let's catch up on authentication, everyone. I know this space was really moving in the past year, so
yeah, I've personally been using Dex, and yeah, I'm super happy with it. It's working great. It supports various kind of different, basically, like data, like configuration providers, like LDAP, where you actually store your users, and Dex just sort of matches LDAP groups with your Kubernetes API. Yeah, definitely check out Dex.
This is when we need Joel on the line.
yeah.
Right. Joel is the maintainer of OAuth 2 Proxy right now, right? I've used Dex and Keycloak both. They both work. Dex is much more lightweight. There might be some use cases where you definitely need more than that, especially if you have more advanced setups. You might want to have actual user management in that too, and not just OIDC, for example, like because you don't have identity providers for everyone. Keycloak, that said, is great, but it's also very complex and very big, so you need to really get deeper to understand it, because you would be running it, I guess. The proxy is good for authenticating in apps like Grafana, although I think a lot of apps are now also providing native OIDC functionality, so you could directly hook up Dex or Keycloak to them. If not, OAuth 2 Proxy is definitely not a bad option. Open Unison, I have no experience with that at all. Does anyone here?
That's actually what I was going to ask. So we actually talked yesterday about this exact question. We use Keycloak because we have a very messed up non-standard LDAP structure that we needed the flexibility to, work with that and remap things. Good example, like member of doesn't exist for us, which kind of makes group lookups difficult.
Didn't you all invent LDAP at the
Yes,
University of Michigan?
yes, we did, and we decided to not adhere to the standard and do our own thing. And oh my God, is it a nightmare?
So there's a lesson to be learned here. Okay. Has anyone? We don't have any Red Hatters on the call. Maybe in the West Coast edition, we're going to do a West Coast show next month. By the way, has Red Hat said anything about the futures of Dex and Keycloak? Are they going to keep them both?
Dex has been spun out as its own project, and Keycloak, they were actually, I don't know its current status, but they were going to they had proposed it against the TOC board for possible donation to the CNCF.
Okay, all right.
I do not know the status of that.
Okay. So both, like, I just want to make sure that both options are like still maintained. You don't paint yourself into a corner by choosing the one that's getting sunset. So it sounds like both projects are still being actively maintained, and you don't have any issues as far as that go. Pierre mentions, I'm securing my Grafana's Prometheus with Nginx annotations with OAuth proxy, and then sends a link there. Thank you for that. Max Guys, welcome back. I remember you from before. Says, I'm doing OIDC for Kubernetes API exposed to internet with Nginx ingress. Be careful with that and the Nginx external auth pointing to OAuth-2 proxy.
Is anyone else, even like in chat, doing anything with Open Unison? Because I had heard of it, but like hadn't ever really considered looking at it until yesterday.
Sanjeev does mention Keycloak and Open Unison both offer LDAP scheme remapping for these sorts of issues. I've been testing it, looking for others. Open Unison. Sounds like the person asking the question has more expertise than we do on this. Max Guy mentions
research. That's good.
yeah, I love it when people do the research. You might be on the panel next month. Max Guy says OIDC for Kubernetes API is a bit tricky with a kubectl config. I use Kuberos, an archive project, for generating the commands and kubeconfig. I hear the Heptio Labs / Gangway does something similar. Is Gangway ours?
Yeah, I do remember. Yeah, if you have like a bare OIDC setup, then you will need to set up your kubectl the first time somehow.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to do this manually, there is these tools that help you.
I totally forgot about Gangway, and I worked there.
I have a little bash helper script that works for Keycloak.
Okay.
And Keycloak does have an interface too, right?
Yeah. It was just so that people wouldn't have to log into the web page.
So he has researched this quite a bit. He's just looking for real world experiences here. So in the thread, Max Guy has some information there. Does anybody else have any? I feel like we are not as deep on this subject as we could be, but we see people typing, so let's give them a minute. And we have about 25 minutes left. So if you have questions, feel free to queue them up. We've got about 2 or 3 questions in the queue. So, you know, we definitely got plenty of room left in the show. So don't be shy about asking questions.
We missed some in the chat that didn't get put in the doc.
Okay. All right.
I'm
Can handle
them in.
that. We will. Looks like lots of people are typing. Ben Bartels mentions off 0. That's in the question thread here. So someone brought up a good point that we should. It probably helps to repeat the question in Slack, so that the information is in the live stream while we're doing that. So we'll figure out something cleaner than that. Because right now I'm looking at the thread and it's not showing up on the stream. But all right, let's let that conversation continue about off here for a little bit, and then we'll come back for any more information that people have or that are actually using it in anger. Would be great. All right. I hope I get this name right. Gerson Mendes de Souza asks, how can I know why my pod is taking too much time to start? I created a cron job, but it's stuck with container creating status for a long time, taking 5 minutes to complete. I'll put some info in the thread. And thank you, Pierre, for tossing the question in. Really appreciate that. Let's see what we have here. Any ideas on this?
So I was gathering questions. I'll reread it.
Yep. 1 second. Threading is both the greatest and most terrible feature of Slack. Like, it's really nice organized. It just makes going back to these questions really hard. So they've tossed in their logs for a kubectl describe pod and their push notification trigger.yaml and their kubectl get pods. Does someone need time to consume this? I can come back to you if one of you just wants to read and then come back. Up to you.
I think we're all reading it right now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. In the meantime, if you're joining us, let me just do a public service announcement while you all are catching up. If you're joining us from YouTube, this is the Kubernetes office hours. We do this the third Wednesday of every month. We hop onto YouTube, we queue up your questions, and we try to get through them as quickly and as sanely as possible. We always enjoy community participation. And this panel is a bunch of experts. So if you want to hop on, or a bunch of volunteers. So if you want to hop on here and pay it forward, we do have a rotating set. The commitment is 1 hour a month. All we need, as long as we get 5 people or whatever to run the show, that's really all we need. So we're always looking for new people to help mix it up, different levels of expertise. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. In the meantime, we'd like to thank the following companies for supporting the community by allowing their volunteers to sit on the panel for us. That's Giant Swarm, StockX, Pivotal, Pusher.com, Weaveworks, VMware, the University of Michigan, Red Hat, Utility Warehouse, and the City of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, for lending us Chris's expertise. And as always, a special thanks to the CNCF for sponsoring the t-shirt giveaway, which we will get to in about 15 minutes or so. All right, panel, what do we think?
Definitely, scheduler scheduled it at 5 minutes back and 55 seconds. Within a minute, kubelet has got the information, pulled the image, and started the container. So it's a question of when the kube apply command was started, and when actually the container the pod has showed up, right? From the events, it is clear that within a minute the pod has come up. It is a question of how long did it take for the scheduler to actually schedule it in a certain node. That's where I would debug as a first starting point.
Any other tips here or where to get started?
Yeah, like looking at the logs and events, it doesn't seem that anything is really like out of, like not working. So basically something is slow, and I would actually investigate basically Kubernetes behavior, either scheduler, looking at like metrics, figuring out how long it actually takes on average to like schedule pods and things like that.
Yeah, I would maybe on this one, as the container is in creation, like the pod has been created and saying it's creating the container for quite a while, most probably go to the Docker level, like to the host level, and check out if there is an issue with Docker being stuck. Check out flag latency. It's a typical thing where you can see that Docker is stuck, or I'm not sure if you're running Docker at all. Maybe it's containerd. So I would go to the runtime debug level. Don't suspect Kubernetes being involved in that issue too much.
Yeah, I mean, Marky has mentioned it. One of the other things is the number of API requests that you send it to the system is also matters. Maybe you have to tweak around that aspect of Kubernetes and see if it comes faster. You know, if you run so many jobs, then it might be slower in that aspect.
Yeah, the cron jobs themselves are actually kind of funky. If there's thousands of them, it's probably going to have problems. There's actually, I believe, an enhancement right now on how they actually want to handle graduating those to GA, because it needs some rework.
Any other tips on this one? All right, so Fummer Draws, aka Pierre, asks, hey, I'm currently looking to move some of our IAC logic into the application repos, in particular, provisioning databases and Kubernetes secrets. Anyone know what IAC is? That's a new one for me.
Structure as code, George. It's just a shorthand for
okay, got you. Oh, hey, Mario's here. Introduce yourself after the question. This is one of my private projects, but has the same logic, and then they put a GitHub link there to their Terraform. The contents of this I would like to move into the application repo instead of having it in my infrastructure of code repo. If you have talks, videos, slides, or blog posts on this topic, please let me know. I would really like to explore this some more. Thanks in advance. Any tips for them?
So I at least will say one thing, be very careful with your provisioning of databases. This is why we need Josh. Another contributor, Josh Burkus, who sort of specializes in this sort of thing, has a series of really good blog posts on it. There's a lot of sort of caveats to managing them in there.
Yeah, I'm a fan of keeping the infrastructure code in its own separate repo, because the lifespans of the app versus the code or the infrastructure might be a little different. So it depends on how you want to handle life cycling, that kind of thing. But I find it's easier if they're separate. You don't keep provisioning your infrastructure based on a code change.
Yeah, I actually want to agree with that 4,000%. We actually ran into this. We build our circle pipelines for all of our services, like 40 of them. And we decided that we'd put Terraform in that as well, as part of that pipeline. So a given service would, for each pipeline run, execute Terraform that would verify the current state of the database for that service, right? However, we had this whole big thing where we put an approval step on it and a gate, and developers actually started hating us because they didn't understand the Terraform that we were putting in their repos, and they didn't understand why they had to click an extra approval step, and they didn't really look at what Terraform was saying. So we actually had a lot of issues where the database, someone went in and did a manual change that was actually for the better. Maybe they shouldn't have done that, but they didn't update the Terraform. There was this kind of delay before the pipeline would run, and then it runs, and then it says, oh, wait a second, I'm going to revert it back to what I know it should be good state, and then something breaks. And so what we're now working on is ensuring that all of that is kind of isolated from the application itself. So it's fine to do separate database or Redis instances, let's say, for your services, but they don't necessarily need to be managed in the repo that your service lives out of. So we actually have an infrastructure repo that most of that lives out of, in addition to cluster configurations, IKS, CTL, YAMLs, and Helm chart services and things like that. They're more core that the platform team cares about. So yeah, definitely, infrastructure as code is great. I think like Weave recently and others are doing this thing where there's a pipeline for your infrastructure repo which verifies your actual infrastructure is where it should be. And I think that's where we're definitely what Bob and Burkus and things like that are saying of your core services are core to the operation of your platform. Be very careful when you're trusting an automated pipeline to make changes in that realm. We're tiptoeing into that, possibly, but and I know like Terraform Enterprise and Atlantis, there's tools that do this on the Terraform side of things. But yeah, that's it's exciting and it's kind of all the rage, but also sometimes you just need to jump in a shell and verify some things yourself or run your EKS CTL commands yourself against an environment. So I will end with, I am Mario Loria. I work at StockX. I obviously do SRE gymnastics and make sure things are alive. My focus is kind of on ingress, networking, some service mesh, lately Canary deploys, and auto scaling. And also Datadog. So thank you. And I'm glad that we are doing this. I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, and I do have the blog post from Josh Burkus linked to somewhere in the Kubernetes forums, but I currently can't find it. So if someone remembers, I should actually bookmark that because I think we use...
I'd say every other time.
Yeah, it's, other than Cilium, this is probably the second most popular link that we mention every week. So someone can help me find that while I move on to the next question. So Pierre, hopefully that gives you some more information. And as always, panel, feel free to give them some more advice. All right. So Bell17 asks, what's the best practice on how to manage, update, and migrate CRD versions?
Ooh, that's a topic. Currently, I would say there is most probably no best practice because not many people are actually doing it. CRDs are quite fresh and people working with CRDs are quite fresh. Mm-hmm. The current practice at all is having a webhook that migrates between your versions that you implement, usually yourself. I talked to James, one of the maintainers of the Cert Manager project, which is also a CRD controller project. And they have a quite generic package for migrating CRDs, even if they're not using them yet. I would just check out the Cert Manager GitHub repo in the packages. They have a migration, some migration code that works against two different versions of your types. As far as I remember, I haven't looked into it since San Diego, but that's where he pointed me to it.
One other thing I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was done.
Okay. If you can run your clusters at 117, or if you can set that as a minimum requirement, both defaulting and pruning are now GA. Yeah, pruning was GA in 116, and defaulting is now there 117. I know that's been a big request for a long time, and that should help more with the migrations of this stuff. You're still essentially, you're still probably going to have to wind up setting like some mutating admission webhook to handle the upgrade or something like that. But now you can at least move more of the logic out of your core application.
Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting workaround to say maybe you don't use kind of the migration logic of like actual CRD versioning, but you use an admission webhook to just migrate all incoming old versions to a new version. That might be really interesting to look into.
I think that's been a way at least some people have done it.
Yeah,
it's been a while since I've looked into it.
Would Red Hat's operator lifecycle manager assist with that at all? I'm just vaguely aware of it. So,
to be honest, I have no idea. I've not looked into it.
Me neither.
The other complicated thing is like, every CRD, every application that you're building is a little bit different. So like, I don't know if a generic framework would really, help you, because you're probably going to have some application specific logic in there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason you're CRDing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I would maybe try in the beginning to not expose too much your CRD as an API to users while you don't have it right yet, and communicates the alpha status of it similarly to how Kubernetes does it. We do it upstream to not fall into like deprecation issues internally. But then internally, you might have contracts with other teams anyway somehow, and might not even be able to deprecate anything.
Yeah. And Sanjeev's 2 cents, if you're writing a new CRD yourself, you should think about writing an upgrade function in that controller. If you're picking up someone's CRD, you may not get an upgrade function built in. Ouch. A related concept is operator lifecycle manager, which handle this if your CRD is within an operator. And Bell says, I see. Thanks. And then we got more information from Pierre, so we're going to go back to that. And then Sammy, your question will be next. And then we'll get to the raffle, which Bob will be rolling our dice for us. Just going to give you the heads up there. And I was able to find the links to Josh Berkus's database links. So 2 links there. There's a 2-part blog series and then a discussion on the forums about that 2-part blog series. I will strongly consider pinning that topic in the general discussions, so as it comes up. But Pierre gives us some more background on his question. Just to clarify, our database is still Kubernetes external and not inside of Kubernetes. We're looking to provision only databases inside our Azure database clusters and provision the secrets inside of K8s as part of the CI/CD pipeline of the applications. What do we think about that?
I think is this the same guy that okay, yeah, and yeah, looking at provision databases inside our Azure database clusters. So yeah, so those are external to the cluster. So that's Terraform or whatever they're using for that, which definitely, you want that in a repo. Actually, you want everything to be a PR, right? You want any change to be a PR, and I think that's super nice. However, getting there can be tricky depending on where you're at, where you're starting from. And then secrets inside of K8s as part of CI/CD. Yeah, right there. I think the big thing is handling secrets. So you don't want secrets in your repositories, and you want to be careful with your UI of your CI/CD pipeline. You don't want someone to go in and say rerun job with SSH, and then they can jump in and look at environment variables and get those secrets relatively easily. I've heard of people that have had security incidents where that's happened before. So you definitely want to make sure that those are handled appropriately. And yeah, and then getting them in a pipeline is really nice. I think the big thing with the pipeline is putting gates in place at first to be safer, and then understanding the nature and life cycle of how people are going to interact with it, and where it's, where your needs are going to be. And then maybe you can pull some off later on or make more dense decisions. So hopefully that helps.
I just had a look at that private project they posted, and like I do think creating the secret where you create the database is not a bad idea. Doing it in Terraform, moving it to the app, I don't know, to a chart or so. Not sure what it is actually solving. Do you have issues syncing the two, or I mean, if there is issues, maybe also think about what you want to use as as I don't know, secret management, secret holding place. I mean, you could use, I don't know, something like Vault in between, where Terraform just puts the secret in Vault and you pull it out again in your app deployment. Not sure if that helps avoiding the issues that you currently have. But I don't think there is anything wrong with the way you're doing it right now, just creating the secret and agreeing on a name, how the secret got created by Terraform. I mean, you could go deeper into, I don't know, service broker, service catalog API things, but I don't think that is there yet for such things.
Marky's linking to the Stack Exchange black box, safely store secrets and Git. I've not seen that one before. That's a new one. All right. Any more tip? I see people typing. So let's.
We only have a couple minutes left.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get to our last question, and then we'll try to spin back over to that. Last one goes from Sammy. Was going through this issue regarding capturing pod eviction. Is there a way to know to track a successful pod eviction? I think everyone's reading through the issue while Bob figures out the lottery winners.
Already done? They're there in the doc.
Why don't you just tell me who they are? We'll just announce it publicly.
Okay.
All right.
One sec. Sean Chitwood.
Okay.
And this name I'm absolutely going to butcher. Gerson Mendez de Suva.
Got you.
And then or it was just two winners, right?
Yeah.
And then Sanjeev for being awesome.
Yes. Awesome. You know what? We're going to do that from now on. What we'll do is we'll give away 2 random t-shirts. People ask questions. And people who are helpful in chat, we'll give them a t-shirt. And that will encourage people to participate more. Anything on this issue here? 56272. Let me open that bad boy up here.
Honestly, I have no idea.
Yeah. It's interesting. I always, if the bot is talking to itself like for 3 months in a row, you're like, uh-oh, what's going on with this issue?
I'm going to think that maybe I track the audit log somehow and write a rule to notify on that parameter, but I don't know if that's actually feasible. So again, something like Falco.
Any other tips or ideas on this one from the audience? Hope you've had a good time. We're going to wrap it up here in a minute.
Actually, we've in the Gerson's thread, answer solution was found.
Ooh, okay. Let's. Can you link me up on that one? I'll just go ahead and read it.
If you pop back into thread, I 1 sec. Let me see.
That's
I can link to it. It's kind of like dumb on like I can't actually link to a message if it's in a thread.
Yeah, I know.
You link to the main message, like the top message in the thread. You should be able to right click on its timestamp.
Yep.
There we go. Okay. Scrolling down.
Exhaustion of CPU.
How do we get to that conclusion?
Okay.
There. Okay. So I see Mark. Oh, so Marky had him run a describe on the node, and there it is. CPU says 96%, and Marky says, "Yep, there it is."
And limits that are 132%.
Okay.
Of the box.
So they had set the limit for more than it was physically available on the box.
So it wouldn't actually schedule until
Right.
yeah.
Right. Okay, so they just have to adjust that to match what the hardware is, and then that should be fine.
Is this just the kubelet allocatable settings? I'm guessing then, Bob. I'm kind of coming in bolted on, but
a pod wasn't being scheduled because there were too many pods scheduled for like the requested limits.
oh, okay, gotcha.
Yep, and we are out of time. I'm sorry, Sanjeev, on that one. So what we are going to do here is queue up your questions, and then we could start addressing them next month. And what I do is I keep a real little running tab of major issues that people bring up. So that's how we usually get up to the database things and best practices. And then I do try to communicate that to the proper SIG inside of Kubernetes itself. So this is a way for us to actually see what problems people are running to in real life and communicate that information back to the developers to hopefully figure that out. So auth, I think, is a spot where we could definitely use a little help on that. So that will be our 2019 goals, I think, for the group. And with that, we're going to close it up. Thanks everyone in chat for hanging out. We will be back. I always put the top date and the YouTube URL to our next stream at the top of the Slack channel. And as always, you could just subscribe to the YouTube channel and get all the Kubernetes content that we do. We do have a sister program the first Wednesday of every month, which is Meet Our Contributors with Paris Pittman. That is basically a similar format to this, except people that want to get involved in contributing to Kubernetes itself. So this show mostly is how to get you how to get your Kubernetes up and working. And then that show is like, how do I contribute to Kubernetes, and has a similar format. And with that, I think that is a wrap for today. Any last comments? Last chance panel to type, audience to type, panel, any last comments? All right, happy deploying everyone, and we'll see everyone in a month. Thanks.
Later.
And stand by for a sec.